joining us. I wish we were all sitting around a table, but we're getting accustomed to these Zoom meetings and actually accomplishing more than I ever thought could be accomplished in these remote settings. I'd like to discuss several things briefly and then focus a little bit more on our main subject today, which is security. But let me first start with lead, which I know many of you recognize has been something I've focused on early on, and I criticized Nycha for failing to use effective methods to identify in what apartments children under 6 live. Well, I guess maybe pleased is the wrong word because we have found more children, but I think it's a good thing. Nycha, in the new administration, working with the 3 departments that we help set up, compliance, environmental health and safety, and quality assurance, they undertook, along with our suggestions, a truly effective review of where children under 6 might be living, and they actually found over 2,500 more apartments where there were children under 6, and there might be, or they knew there was lead-based paint. So that's 2,500 apartments. I don't know how many children that is, but I really want to thank them for undertaking that. And by doing that, remember, they were demonstrating they didn't get it right the first time, and they were creating more work for themselves. But they understood all of that and wanted to do the right thing. So I want to thank them for that effort. And now with the XRF testing that Nycha has been using more and more and covering more apartments, they're able to get into a position where when they go into an apartment, they'll be able to figure out by going into Maximo whether there's lead in the apartment, and if there is, where is the lead? It could be in a different room, so that Nycha would not have to undergo full lead protocols working in a room where there is no lead. So there's some real progress on that, and very importantly, the children under 6 hopefully will be protected. The second thing I wanted to quickly address is heat. Obviously, as we enter the heat season, Nycha has been working since the end of the heat season to now the beginning of the new heat season to identify problem areas where boilers may fail and systems may fail. I think they've opened 1,800 work orders that they're still working their way through. They haven't done all of them. And part of the problem sometimes is the fact that they couldn't get into apartments. But they have developed an analytics with us and with PTAD at Nycha, so they could use analytics to try to predict where there may be problems. As I think we all know, heat failures can be because a boiler breaks down, but it also can be because a distribution system fails. That distribution could be the risers, it could be the pipes underground, it could be a lot of things, but those distribution systems are not visible. So it really is not, there isn't an effective way to examine those. The key to that is to move quickly if there is a failure in the distribution system. And in that regard, we've also worked with Nycha so they can work with City Hall more closely, with a new committee that was formed with leadership from different agencies, so that as we'd like to put it, if Nycha has an emergency, it's everybody's emergency. Every agency's got to come through. So they're using more analytics. They're continuing to make repairs, and they'll be. I think when it comes to the repairs, the key is going to be how quickly that occurs and the response time for that. And one of the issues which is yet to be resolved is how Nycha can get skilled crafts working at night and in off hours, so that when the outage occurs at a time when they're needed in the evening or at night, Nycha can get access to that. And that's something that's still not resolved. But everything that can be done short of that, they are trying to do. There will be outages, there's no doubt, with the age of this system. Nobody is thinking otherwise. The key will be response to the outage, reducing the number of outages because they've done preventative work, and trying to get the skilled workers there as quickly as possible to do what needs to be done. I think many of you may know that Nycha has now restarted the inside apartment work orders, addressing those work orders. It was primarily emergency work orders before. I think the 7, 8, and 9, I think, are the numbers for those of you who follow it that way. Now they're getting more into a more normal schedule. It's still complicated by COVID, so there are certain requirements, but I'm glad to see that started. We've actually worked a lot with Nycha on that, and we are part of their team that is working on prioritizing getting into apartments. It's actually related, in my mind, to the hearings that were held on the ventilation fans held by the city council and our CAC member, Nycha Samuel, who is the chair of the Public Housing Committee. That hearing focused, as it should, on the installation of the ventilation fans, but also we've got to deal with the fact that because we couldn't get into the apartments for 7 months, no ducts were cleaned and no new dampers, fire dampers were put in. So that has to really be a focus. You want the fans, and you want the ventilation ducts cleared, and that's something that Nycha has to turn to now that they can get inside the apartments. And then before we get to security, I wanted to talk a little bit about the organizational plan that is due at the end of the month. Eva, I know, is going to talk about generally. We're only giving her 10 minutes, so she can't say too much, but I know she'll cover the essence of the so-called blueprint and the organizational plan. And I wanted to give you our explanation of how we're approaching this. So under the HUD agreement, Nycha is going to present us with a plan or a document at the end of the month. That is what is written into the agreement. And then I understand, I've been told by a number of people at Nycha that the plan is then to have a 30-day period for resident review of the document that we're getting at the end of the month. Frankly, I'm not really sure why we're getting that document before residents review it, but I want to make this commitment to all of you that I'm not going to be accepting that plan until the residents have time to review it. I could reject it, but I'm not going to accept it, and I'm not going to set a 30-day limit. There'll be continuing participation when we're reviewing that plan. Now, what is the plan supposed to be? In contrast to the blueprint is a series of plans which look to strengthen Nycha, strengthen its resources and its revenue and its access to money, so that major changes can be made. It's a critical part of a plan for the future of Nycha. The plan that the HUD agreement requires is one more directed at what can you do with the resources you have now. Let's get the most and the best out of what you have now and plan for future resources. So because the blueprint is an ambitious plan. It requires some legislative approval, congressional help, HUD cooperation. The HUD agreement doesn't want to wait for that and doesn't wait for that. HUD agreement wants to get things moving faster and work with the resources that we have now. So that is the big difference. And I know there's been some confusion, and I can understand why, because sometimes each of us uses the word transformation in each phase of this, and then there are transformation plans. But the fact is, there is the reorganizational plan under the HUD agreement. Then there's the blueprint that's made up of other plans. You can have the reorganization without having the blueprint. The blueprint needs the reorganization. And I wanted to make that clear, and that I'll be seeking resident engagement on that. So those are the things I wanted to cover relatively briefly, and then I want to lay the outline and the basis for the discussion of security tonight. First of all, we all know that security has become an even bigger issue than it was before, and there are more crimes being committed. There's more gun use, there's more danger than has been in a long time. And while security is not one of the pillars that is set out in the HUD agreement, it is referred to, and it is clear from the responsibility that HUD has and Nycha has that a secure environment is part of what Nycha must offer. But there are some more direct connections between security and the HUD agreement. And remember, my focus is on a HUD agreement, that's enough of a focus for me. There's a lot to do, but I want to give you some examples on how it has a direct impact on the HUD agreement. If lobby doors are broken, homeless people are allowed in overnight, you have to repair the doors over and over again. That's money spent over and over again. That allows people to get into the lobbies and into the stairwells and into the buildings, and that creates additional cleanup costs and repeated cleanup costs. It's cost, it's person power, getting the jobs done. I'll give you another example. The alternate work schedule, AWS, which I know it has not been a big success, but it is a good idea. Nycha is really trying to figure out how best to give you service both in the morning and in the evening. But in the evening, the workers are afraid to go out because of the lack of security. So I don't see how you can ever make that program work unless you start to build up the security and give them comfort that they can go out. So I said the cleaning costs skyrocket. Illegal dumping has been increased because of the lack of security. There's theft of property that has to be replaced. We had one incident. Danny Barber is in the meeting today, and when I walked a development in the Bronx with him, he pointed out to me and to others with me how someone was stealing copper cable from generators. Well, the generators were operating, by the way, which meant that the generators were put out of service. The expensive copper had to be replaced, and it was happening over and over and over again. Well, Fred Baldino, who will speak later in our meeting, who is on our team and used to be with the NYPD, one of Fred's colleagues took the time to go look at the video that we believed might show who was stealing the copper and identified a person. And I'm not going to make any allegations beyond that, but we turned that over to the police for them to take action. So there are so many ways that security influences the quality of life as well as the practical aspects of cost financing, staffing, and everything else you can think of. And I haven't even talked about scaffolding tonight. But we haven't given up on that. And I understand I know the city council passed a bill to take a further study of the use of drones with respect to scaffolding. And I think that's a great step. I recognize I raised drones early on as a potential way to do budgeting on reviewing and inspecting the facades of the buildings. And I recognize that there are privacy issues that have to be addressed, but there are also privacy issues every time someone comes into your apartment to fix a leak. So I believe those privacy issues could be dealt with, and Nycha will be able to identify what buildings can be repaired quickly and therefore don't need the scaffolding. When I first came on board, Nycha told me that they were spending $30 million a year on rent for scaffolding. I think the number is lower, and I think Danny Barber got the most recent numbers, but $30 million a year on scaffolding. And you ask yourself why, and part of the reason is, in many cases, the decision was made it's cheaper to pay the rent for scaffolding than to try to fix the facade. And that has to be reversed. So with meeting with all the people that we do who are residents and who have an interest in Nycha succeeding, we kept hearing over and over again and reading over and over again about security in general. And that's why we wanted to dedicate a meeting to it. Now, I want to register a complaint, however. A year ago, I asked the Nycha community to help me identify where lighting was not effective or not available, because everybody said lighting was a problem. We heard from very few people. So I'm going to ask you now, when the opportunity presents itself, where there's something that needs to be fixed, where there's a problem that is security related. Of course, all problems, let us know, but if it's security related, let's get those packaged together now so they can be addressed at the same time. Please don't assume somebody else is going to be telling us, because it's a widespread problem. We don't mind hearing about the same thing numerous times. In fact, it tells us that it's a pattern rather than just a one-off issue. So with that, since I think I've taken more time than Asha allotted to me, that's one of the good things about a Zoom meeting is nobody can kick you under the table to try to stop you from talking. So I think I've used more than my time, and I'm going to turn it over to Asha again. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Bart, for that important update and for emphasizing the importance of security issues. Because as you said, numerous times when we're talking to residents, that is the #1 issue on everyone's minds. You want to live in safe housing. You want your kids to be safe. You want your grandparents to be safe. And that's something that every single Nycha resident deserves, safety and security. And it really needs to be top of mind for everyone and everyone around this Zoom table, because we all have different vantage points and touch the issue. So we wanted to just have an open discussion tonight to talk about it, to talk about what you're seeing, what you're hearing, what you're doing, and to let this be one of many discussions where we can work together to come up, most importantly, with some sustainable solutions. Bart has heard me tell the story, but as you all know, I grew up in Nycha housing, and the first life lesson that I can remember getting before my ABCs was, when you're out on the stoop, if you hear shooting, get down. As a 2 or 3 year old, I was told to lay on the ground if you hear shooting in front of your building. And that was, not to age myself, 40+ years ago. And prudent parents are still teaching their kids those same life lessons. And granted, it's part and parcel of living in New York City, but that doesn't mean that we can't come up with ways to make our environment safer. So with that, we're going to spend a lot of tonight's meeting focused on two things: updates from our CAC members and a discussion of safety and security issues. But before we get to the agenda, I want to first make a few announcements. You will notice a new face, Jody Collender from the Deputy Mayor's office, Vicki Bean's office. She is joining us and replacing Hallie Stein. So we want to welcome her, and we thank you for your commitment to the CAC. And next, we have two special guests here with us: Fred Baldino, who leads the Nycha Monitor Inspector team. Thank you, Fred, for joining us. We'll hear from you in a moment. And the Citywide Council of President Chair, Danny Barber, who's joining us, and who's also the TAP at Jackson Houses. We want to announce that we will be adding a permanent CCOP seat to the CAC with a member of the CCOP's choosing. And we thank Danny for kicking off by being here with us tonight. Initially, we thought of adding a CCOP member when we initially formed the CAC, but because Bart and I and Edna were having so many direct relationships with the CCOP as a body, we initially thought that that would be sufficient. But we want to deepen our relationship with CCOP and deepen their sightlines into the work that the monitor is doing and vice versa. So we're adding this important seat. And I want to emphasize that the CAC, as we've said from the beginning, will continue to grow and contract. So we're looking to make some more changes and adding some of our current TAP members as advisory members in January and adding more resident members going forward. So keep your eyes and ears open for continued changes, and thank you, Danny, for being here. Next, I want to announce that we did release our 5th quarterly report on August 13th via letter. It's available on the nychamonitor.com website, and it was also emailed to all of you as well as all TAPs. The next report will be released soon and will also be in this shorter letter format to make it more easily digestible. Next, I want to announce that we'll be holding our Bronx community meeting on October 22nd, 2020. We ask you all to help us spread the word, and for all of you joining us via the YouTube link, please know that you're invited. You can register again on the nychamonitor.com website, although priority will be for Bronx residents for speaking. And we are also calling every single TAP in the Bronx to make sure that they've received our email and invitation and help us spread the word to all residents. Next, I will go through tonight's agenda. Thank you, Bart, for opening us up and giving us the updates. Next, we will hear remarks by HUD Regional Administrator Lynn Patton, who will update us on HUD grants, CARES Act, and COVID cleaning and Section 3. Next, we'll hear from New York City Council member Alika Opry-Samuel, who will update us on the City's Council's most recent hearing and upcoming safety and security hearing. And then we'll hear remarks from Nycha Federal Monitor Investigator Fred Baldino, who will update us on the monitor's safety issues that we're seeing in the field. Following that, we'll hear remarks by the NYPD. We have Deputy Inspector Gottesman on the line, who will be giving us crime stats in Nycha housing this year. And we'll also hear remarks from Chief Brennan from the New York Fire Department and Director Caro from the Fire Department, who will give us updates on safety awareness, especially now as we're going into the winter season, as well as updates on training sessions that are available virtually. And then our CCOP Chair, Danny Barber, will open up this session where we are focusing on our TAP leadership that are here with us on the call to talk about safety and security issues that you're seeing in your developments and from Danny Barber's vantage point throughout the city. And before you get into safety issues, Danny, please also let us know more about what the CCOP is doing and how we're all working together and the expectations you have for NYCHA for increased transparency. And then to TAP members, we're asking each person to give us a brief statement focusing on safety and security issues. And then we will have an update from Eva Trimble, the Executive Vice President for Strategy and Innovation, the Office of the Chair, who will update us on both safety and security issues and also on the organizational plan draft. And then we'll open the conversation up for discussion on all the preceding issues and ask for any other CAC member updates. So with that, I will now turn it over to Ms. Patton.
Thank you, Asha, and thank you, everybody. Hello, everyone from New Rochelle. I will be quick. I know that we discussed some of this last time I was here, but obviously, this administration's been giving record amounts of funding to Nycha during the COVID crisis in the form of the Historic CARES Act. To date, HUD has given Nycha an additional, that's on top of the $30 million a week, an additional $194,629,642. So about $195 million on top of their normal formula allocations. This has been given to them in about 4 tranches. I must say some of it is in the form of tenant protection vouchers so that they can cover relocation costs of residents as their units are tested, remediated, etc. They also received a lot of supplemental administrative fee funding in that, which can be used for, let's see here, costs related to payment of PHA staff who are unable to work due to coronavirus, childcare needs for them, delivery of goods and supplies and equipment to residents. And then of course, public housing operating fund money and capital fund money, which can be used to procure cleaning supplies, additional costs for supportive service vendors such as Eastco and Alliance that you guys have been seeing, disinfecting the touch points. I want to stress, as I did in the pre-CAC call, those vendors are not here to clean yet. They are here to disinfect. I know there was some confusion with that in the beginning. They are disinfecting touch points. Hopefully they'll come on board to help supplement cleaning once coronavirus is under control. But in the interim, they are there to disinfect. I know that this money can be used for costs related to maintaining adequate social distancing, purchasing PPE, creation of an infectious disease outbreak plan, all kinds of increasing your internet connection infrastructure, tablets for computers for students and residents, elderly residents who can't obviously be physical with their family members or extended family. It can also be used for physical personnel or security costs incurred to limit movement, expenses to safely transport residents, whole bunch of stuff. One of the other things that I wanted to announce, since this subject is focused on security and safety, is that we also announced to Nycha a couple months ago a 2020 Capital Fund application grant for safety and security. It's an appropriation, for emergency capital needs and safety and security measures for the amount of $34,650,000. The only caveat is that this money has to be applied for, and it can only be made available to public housing authorities that are under current receivership or federal monitor. And that is about 3 or 4 public housing authorities nationwide. So Nycha is obviously one of those. The deadline, as I mentioned on the pre-CAC call, was actually yesterday. I know that Eva had mentioned Nycha was definitely going to apply for that, so I hope they did. That is, again, about $35 million that can be used for capital funds, capital needs like elevator failure, boiler failure, water intrusion, mold growth, sewer line failure, electrical failure, lead paint hazards, carbon monoxide and radon alarms. But it can also be used for safety and security measures, as Bart said earlier, lighting sometimes. Not very high cost but very effective form of security measures. I know that in Baltimore, the Baltimore Housing Authority worked with the Baltimore Police Department to purchase something called a technology called ShotSpotter, which is a system that can monitor and pinpoint the location of gunshots based on tracking of acoustic signature. When a weapon is fired, I know that they installed those ShotSpotters throughout the Baltimore City Public Housing Authority. I'm sure Chief Capucci knows more about that technology than I do. I know that the NYPD is always on top of technology anyway, and they might already have something similar. But those are just to get an idea of what that can be used for. What it cannot be used for is anything that's not tangible, such as overtime for NYPD officers or any sort of overtime for security vendors. But anything permanent, such as security cameras, capital needs, it can be used for. So I hope Nycha took advantage of that. I'm sure we'll hear about that shortly. And last but not least, when I was on the phone earlier with Vicky Bean and Bart and Greg, it occurred to me during the pre-CAC that I neglected to mention something major that just happened at HUD, and that is that Secretary Carson has finally revised the long troubled Section 3 rule. You know, I think everybody on this call who knows what Section 3 is, which is obviously a stipulation that requires that HUD grantees make economic and job opportunities available for low and very low income individuals in the community. There were always some loopholes that allowed, unfortunately, a lot of these grantees to get away with not making good on those requirements. We have effectively eliminated some of those loopholes, such as instead of tracking new hires, we're going to be tracking labor hours. There is new business criteria that makes it easier to register and hire. And what we are going to do is encourage PHAs and HUD grantees to focus on sustained employment and creating that retention of low and very low income reporting metrics. There's also going to be increased oversight. This was a program that was usually operated and overseen by the Department of Fair Housing at HUD. It's now going to be overseen by my office, which is Field Policy and Management. So all future RAs will be in charge of the Section 3 rule. And what that means is if somebody who's receiving CDBG grants, we don't think that that municipality or that city or that town is hiring Section 3 individuals, my office can work with our community planning and development director or public housing director and actually suspend those funds and make sure that they are hiring folks. And one of the things that you're going to see me doing in the coming weeks in order to get the word out is setting up tables as weather permits at various Nycha properties so that we can actually register individuals with labor skills and also individuals with Section 3 businesses right there in the courtyards or what have you, or the community centers. And my team is currently coordinating with Nycha to set up those registration tables in the coming weeks. I think we're going to have 2 this month and hopefully 1 every week going forward. And so we're also going to, obviously, for the sake of coronavirus, provide flyers with the link and instructions on how to register yourself on our portal. These things are extremely easy. And we're super excited to help folks get permanently employed for the long term as they so deserve. So that's something that we're super excited about. And Asha, everybody has a link that maybe they can forward, the monitors team can forward to everybody afterwards that so you can read about the new rule and also read HUD's press release about the final rule. And also, Sherrod wanted me to tell you that he's very sorry he couldn't be here today, and that Dan is going to give his update when it comes around on action plan updates. Unless he wants to do it now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lynn. We appreciate those important updates. I'm going to turn now, please, to Councilwoman Alika Ampry-Samuel for some brief updates, please.
Good evening, everyone. And Regional Administrator Lynn, wow, you were talking and I was texting everyone. Like, we need a full debrief. I can't have a meeting with residents without actually, spending about 30 minutes talking about Section 3. And Absolutely. We had a hearing a couple of years ago in the council. So I look forward to that briefing, as well as tabling and whatever else we can do to get caught up to speed.
And I'll set that up for you.
Thank you. Thank you. And so I'm just going to read my comments in the interest of time, and I can be all over the place too. So thank you again for continuing to host these meetings to the Federal Monitor, Bart. It's easier to say we cannot move forward, and it's difficult to help during COVID, but we know that we have to continue to work. We have to find a way. And so I just wanted to say thank you for continuing to host these sessions. We have to show up and find ways to ensure that apartments are safe and healthy for its residents, especially now during the pandemic. And again, Bart, I want to say thank you about your comments earlier when you said that you won't approve a plan until residents review it first. I appreciate that statement. I really do. I always say that plans should be implemented with resident input. And what you said about oversight regarding the blueprint that the chair has been doing his briefings on, it helps to clear up some confusion. So that was helpful as well. Thank you. So tonight I wanted to just talk briefly about two things. One, to just highlight the fact that we held a hearing about mold last week. And two, to provide information about a couple of upcoming hearings that we will hold directly related to safety and security. One is going to be held on the 21st next week, and another one will be held next month. So last week, Wednesday, October 7th, the Public Housing Committee held an oversight hearing titled "An Update on Nycha's Plan to Address Chronic Mold Conditions at Nycha's Developments." That was the title of it. Because mold has been an ongoing problem and the federal agreement includes a requirement to address mold and abatement, it was critical for us to hold an oversight hearing as we approach what looks to be an uptick in COVID cases. During the last CAC meeting, I discussed some concerns that we had about COVID numbers that were revealed in the media and how those numbers were totally skewed towards NYCHA residents and communities around NYCHA. At the beginning of the hearing, the general manager stated, and so this is at the beginning of last week's hearing, the general manager, Vito Massachulo, stated, "While mold is a long-standing and challenging issue, we have the partners and plans we need to overcome it. With the Mold Busters program, the Mold and Leaks Action Plan, major capital investments, and partners like the Federal Monitor and OCC, we will continue to make real improvements at the authority that make a real difference for residents." And that's to end his quote. So the purpose of the hearing was to understand the what, the how, the where, and the when. Meaning, what is NYCHA doing? Where are they doing it? How are they doing it? And I was disappointed, and my colleagues were disappointed in not really understanding exactly what's happening and making sure that residents have a clear understanding as to whether their apartments are safe from mold, and if they are not, when will this be remedied? So during the hearing, that was a struggle for all of us. The Federal Monitor, so Bart, you mentioned tonight when you were talking about lead, that when we are talking about repairs, the issues is how quickly that occurs and the response time. And I wrote that down because it's the same for mold. during a pandemic that attacks the respiratory system. How quickly, are the repairs occurring and the response time? And during our hearing, it was just constantly confusing because we were not able to ascertain, to get like a clear-cut understanding as to what is happening in each development, and how can the residents be assured that their apartment is just going to be clear of mold. And so that was a constant struggle for us. And I just want to mention that our hearings are not about the gotcha. It's really about getting to the bottom of what we can do to fix things now. Like how are we prioritizing the different cases and the different departments and the different types of mold? And how is Nycha just prioritizing the work orders? And we were left disappointed. And it's imperative that BART and just the federal monitor team continue to prioritize mold, especially during the pandemic. So I did appreciate the testimony from Mr. Green, the compliance officer, because he talked a lot about the response to making sure that all complaints are addressed. But I was totally disappointed in Vito's comments in his statement that there was no correlation between poor ventilation and the spread of the virus. I even read, the latest report from the CDC that spoke to ventilation. And I was just really disappointed in that comment that Vito made. On top of the fact that there was some 15,000 plus work orders related to mold, and some 9,000 as of the day of the hearing, October 7th, there were still over 9,000 repairs that needed to be made related to mold. And most of those were complex. They were not simple mold cases. They were complex mold cases. And we were not able to get an understanding as to how many days, what is happening with each 9,000. And again, this was just really a sense of wanting the residents to know what's happening and to feel some kind of security in knowing that help is on the way. And again, it's not about the gotcha. It's just really about getting some clear understanding and information for residents. So that was last week. Next week, my committee, the Public Housing Committee, jointly with Criminal Justice, Justice System, General Welfare, and Housing and Buildings, will host an oversight hearing about reentry. And this is to directly discuss programs and plans that are in place for folks, family members that are coming home and being able to reunite with family. Understanding for some that this is a safety and security issue, but having a real conversation about some archaic policies that Nycha has as it relates to family members returning home. So that's next week. But in light of what we're talking about in today's CAC meeting, it's important to highlight that next month in November, we will host a joint hearing with the Mental Health Committee. And this is about the city's mental health response to community violence. And this hearing aims to address the city's response in communities that are affected by gun violence, shootings, and other community violence. These communities experience trauma each time violence occurs, and this hearing would inspect what mental health resources, education, and outreach are deployed within communities to address this particular traumatic experience. And just to put it in context, I had a shooting that led to another death. This is the third time someone died in just the past couple of months in the Howard Houses complex. And when we reached out to the city of New York for resources to have trauma counseling, we had an idea to, put chairs out, open space, social distancing in the basketball court area. And we were told that the city would not be able to come out and do trauma counseling. We can do Zooms. And I just wanted to highlight that point because we have contracts with the city. Like after a shooting last year in my district, there was $1.5 million that was allocated for trauma counseling. And we did not see that funding until May of this year, the second week in May. And the contract had to be completed by the end of the budget, which was the end of June. And so that was 6 weeks to be able to effectively have, trauma counseling in the community where, gun violence is usually in the top 2 of the city of New York. And so we're going to discuss that in November's hearing. And so because we're talking about safety and security, we also have to, be mindful of, when there is safety and security issues, the detrimental impact, the traumatic experience on families and the community that comes out of that. And so we will be discussing that next month. And that is all from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman, for your commitment to tackling those really hard issues in our community and facing our city. I am going to ask that the rest of our presenters be a little bit truncated in your remarks so that we can try to get back on schedule and have time for discussion. But I'll next turn it over to Fred Baldino. What not everyone knows is that the Monitor team has a dedicated arm of trained former law enforcement and detectives who are helping in the field every day to see exactly what's going on in Nycha developments. And they have developed relationships with Nycha staff and residents, and are really the eyes and ears for what's happening and alerting the Monitor team so that we can really stay well informed about what's happening in all of the various developments. And this team, even during COVID, was still out in the developments, meeting with everyone. And I wanted to just turn to Fred, please, to give us an update about what you're seeing, particularly as it relates to the pillar areas, because it's all so interrelated. Fred, please.
Sure. First off, Asha and Bart, thank you very much. It's not too often I get a chance to highlight the field team, and I got to tell you, and I'm sure you guys have gotten their work product, and I'm very proud of them for what they do. And it's heartening to see how dedicated they are. And really, when they go out there, they're out there every day assigned to these developments, and their main focus really is to serve the residents, to do the best for the residents. I, along with the entire team, routinely talk to residents. We talk to TAPs. We talk to stakeholders like management people, skilled tradespeople, maintenance workers, caretakers. We do all of that. And we visit apartments. We watch work being done, lead abatement, mold remediation. And so with all that, we've witnessed some of the horrendous conditions that some of the residents have to live in. And that hits home for the entire team. And so I give them credit for going out every day, and they were really working hard to identify, not to find wrong, but to try and make it go right. And that's a big part of what we do. So as Asha mentioned, we have a team of 8 people. They're all former law enforcement detectives with investigative experience. Each one is assigned to specific developments. They make routine visits to those developments. They meet with as I mentioned, all of the stakeholders. We talk to a lot of people. We respond to a lot of the complaints that come through the Monitor's email or voicemail complaint system. But in addition to that, we have our own internal real-time, real person at the end of the phone card that we hand out in the field. Many of those calls are funneled to me. I receive them, and we work diligently with whoever calls to try and resolve some of their issues. Excuse me. So with that, as I mentioned, they are retired law enforcement people, but more importantly, and many of these people, many of our people have been in the private sector for many years now, primarily doing integrity monitoring and construction integrity monitoring. And so they not only bring law enforcement experience to their routine work, they also bring a perspective on construction and maintenance repair. Now, they're not the experts, but they're general people who know what's right and what it takes and how to do a repair properly. And so with that, part of their protocol is to go to these apartments and observe the work being done. And we don't hesitate to comment if it's not being done correctly. And that's one of the issues that we try to bring to the table. They are all certified with OSHA. So they have, they're very familiar with construction safety and security issues pertaining to construction. So it's that type of tools that they bring to the table with this monitorship. As Asha mentioned, we primarily are the boots on the ground, you know, the ears to the ground, and with the eyes and ears for Bart and the rest of the monitorship in terms of what's happening at the developments. We concentrate on the 5 pillars, you know, lead, mold, heat, and hot water, as well as pest and waste management and resident community engagement. And within those 5 pillars, what abundantly becomes clear is that there are safety and security issues that impact on every one of these things. I could give you examples of heat and hot, you know, well, mold, for example. Yeah, you know, we walk the buildings, we cover the basements, we look through the hallways, we go to the roofs, and sometimes, and we come across roofs that have been vandalized. Sometimes, quite often, the roof fans that mitigate mold in the apartments are vandalized. The vents are plugged up, which causes leaks and mold conditions. And so it's that type of vandalism. Front door entry breaks causes homeless people to come into the buildings. Boiler rooms basically vandalized. We have homeless people sometimes found living in boiler rooms. And so it's all of those issues that play into the 5 pillars. And so, as you know, at this point, if we're talking about safety and security, we're not law enforcement. We are former law enforcement, but we have the ability to basically look at a situation, and from what I ask these people to do out in the field is to concentrate on the root causes of the vandalism that's taking place. Not so much. We do refer cases that we've developed. We've referred bigger cases to the Southern District. We've referred smaller cases to the police department. We're also now working very closely with the newly formed compliance department within Nycha to ensure proper compliance on things that don't necessarily reach to the level of criminal activity. But the point is, through all of the observations that we do, we're examiners, and we're ensuring Nycha is in compliance with the 5 pillar requirements under the HUD agreement. But there are other things. It's only natural for other things to come to the surface, because we're there every day. We get to know people. They open up with us. They talk to us confidentially, and we follow up on some of the things that they supply to us. They provide to us, and that includes safety and security issues. So we've got a vast a dearth of information in terms of safety and security. It's compartmentalized because there are, you know, law enforcement has to be actively involved in much of the stuff that comes our way. But there are other things on the Nycha side, on the administrative side, that if we really took a, you know, outside the box look at the root causes, we might be able to address some of these issues. For example, you know, I know it's impossible it's against the law to lock roof doors, but if there's a way to ensure or start capturing through video or something along those lines, people that go to the roof, maybe by that point you could identify who might be vandalizing the roof fans and thus mitigate the mold. So there's hundreds of examples like that are out there that, you know, with active participation, I think we could come up with some, you know, some resolution for some of the issues that are happening under developments. That's pretty much where we're at. The field investigators are there. They're active. They're meeting with people. They are willing, able, and want to get involved in taking more information in. I encourage everyone to send complaints or issues to the monitor's email or the voicemail. And quite frankly, we've dealt with many TAPs. We've dealt with many community center directors. They all have our internal confidential phone number, and they do call because I take those calls. And so with that, we hope to make some significant impact on in bettering the lives of the Nycha residents.
Thank you, Fred. And thank you for also hitting on the fact that, it's just time to start thinking outside of the box and collaborating on ways that we could really try to find some solutions. And one of the obvious ones is, having cameras, manning the cameras, and enforcing some of those important rules, because it's, not anecdotal these days that the crime stats are really skyrocketing right now. And it's a variety of reasons, but it doesn't change the fact that at the end of the day, Nycha residents are feeling less safe. So I wanted to turn now, please, to Deputy Inspector Howard Gottesman with the NYPD to give us the real statistics.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can.
Hi, can you
Please
hear me?
proceed.
Okay, great, thank you. I'm sorry I couldn't join via Zoom. At the NYPD, we use Microsoft Teams, and therefore I'm on the phone. The statistics for the year, when it comes to major crime and public housing, so we're actually slightly down, just under 1% down. Now, when we talk about major crime, we're talking about the 7 categories of major crime tracked by the FBI. Murder, rape, robbery, felony assault, burglary, grand larceny, and auto theft. But I'd like to talk about violence. Violence, what we call violence, really is the shootings, the shots fired, and unfortunately, citywide, we're seeing a spike in public housing. For the year, shooting incidents are nearly double, 254 versus 133. That's about 91%. And our victims being shot, because of course you could have, unfortunately, more than one person shot in a shooting incident. That's more than double, 308 versus 152. The whole city, public housing and every place else, is seeing that same proportional increase. So, year to year, public housing tends to have about 20% or 21% of the shooting incidents. And we're seeing the same thing this year. The rest of the city is also nearly double when it comes to shootings and shooting victims. So, unfortunately, we've had a number of things that have happened since the beginning of the year, starting with bail reform, starting with the release of inmates to general population neighborhoods because of the pandemic, and the fact that we were not able to renew our attrition numbers by putting in a new academy class. So all of those things compound, and it doesn't mean we still don't go out there and police. We are absolutely spread as thin as we possibly can. We're moving members from administrative jobs outside of the Housing Bureau into the Housing Bureau. Over the summer, we put an additional 60 members to 2 separate PSAs. We're also doing administrative all-outs where we have officers who are not being permanently transferred, but for either one tour or part of a shift, they're being deployed to our hotspots. We're also doing high visibility foot posts, and what we're really honing in on is the gang crew awareness that is happening in public housing. A lot of this violence is motivated by what we call crews. The average citizen may call it a gang. Crews are less, they're more prevalent, they're a bigger problem, and they're probably less well known, but nonetheless, they are responsible for a tremendous amount of the shootings that we're seeing in public housing. So we're actively identifying the folks that are involved and trying to, I don't want to use the word target, but trying to examine whether or not we could stop the violence through interdicting the gang members. In other words, if we know who is responsible, that's who we want to either speak to with violence interrupters, or that's who we want to make aware that we know what's going on. So, for example, we know people are still carrying guns, probably more now than before. This year alone, our gun arrests are up. In the last 28 days, we have more than doubled our gun arrests for the same period last year, 135%. 47 guns were seized versus 20 for the last 28 days in 2019. And in fact, the week that just closed out, October 11th, this past Sunday, our gun arrests have went up 500%, which is an extraordinary number. We tend to not see such high increases. So there are folks out there carrying firearms. We are making the arrests, but the gun violence is something that we have worked desperately since late May to really drive down. In fact, up through May 10th of this year, our shootings were actually down. And then that week and the following week, they kind of turned the corner. We were up slightly, and then we just never looked back. The end of May, June, July really took off, and the numbers just exploded to numbers we haven't seen in 19 to 20 years. That is really what we are focused on right now. Asha, I know you mentioned earlier in the meeting that when you were 2 or 3 years old, one of the first lessons you remember is what to do when you hear shots being fired. And you felt that that's probably still true today. If it is, that's terrible. And I'm sorry that you had to go through that growing up in public housing. No one should have to do that. I myself live in Brooklyn. I have children. I've never had to tell them what to do when they hear shots being fired. We don't hear shots being fired. And there's no reason why the folks who live in public housing, near public housing, should have to be aware of what to do when they hear shots being fired. That's just absolutely terrible and really unacceptable. We speak to Nycha all the time. There's a retired chief, Gerald Nelson, who is the vice president of safety and security. I don't think a day goes by where I don't speak to him several times. In a week, I'm speaking to him 20 or more times through emails, through phone calls, through texts. We're very plugged in. The Housing Authority has given us access to over 40% of their cameras. They have about 17,000 plus cameras. We have access to over 6,900 of those. Many are being actively monitored 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. But most importantly, we're pivoting. We don't have the numbers we had in terms of officers out there. Unfortunately, our budget wasn't what it was like the year before and the year before that. So, we're policing smarter. We're spreading our officers out where needed, and trying to put out hotspots as they come up. We still have a long way to go, but we have a commitment, not just to the public housing community and to the Housing Authority, but to all of the city, because whatever happens in public housing doesn't just affect public housing. It manifests its way to other parts of the city. We see crews that are active in not just one borough, but a second borough, and we see retaliation shootings. That's really what we want to drive down. That's what's really pushing the crime. Historically, domestic violence was an issue in public housing. It's always been the driver of crime up until 2020. And when COVID came, we were predicting that our domestic violence numbers would explode. And quite the contrary happened. We're actually seeing a reduction. We're down about 12.5% in our domestic violence complaints. Of course, those only gauge what's reported, but there's no reason to think that any less is being reported now because of COVID than was prior to COVID. So, we're glad to see that the domestic violence numbers are down, but we really need to drive these shootings down, and that's where we need the help of the community. We've always needed the help of the community. Now we need it more than ever. That's really the message we wanted to get out. I know we're short on time, so I'm gonna stop now. But if you want, you could share the link that I sent you, I believe, last week or the week before, starting these crime numbers. They are publicly available on the city's website. Anyone to look at. They could even look at development by development. We have them broken down, the 7 major categories that I spoke about, and the shootings are broken down separately. Shootings are folded into felonious assault, but we do have them broken down separately because a felonious assault could be something other than a shooting. It could be, a stabbing or somebody being struck by an object. And I encourage people to go onto that link and see what their development looks like. But just the mere perception that there is a problem, regardless of what the numbers show, because you may have some developments that have no major
And
crimes.
Deputy Inspector Gottesman, can you confirm that NYPD is still doing verticals in the developments, even with the budget changes?
Yes, most certainly. The NYPD is still doing interior vertical patrols in public housing developments. We never stop.
Asha, could I just break in and ask a question? I hate to put you on the spot, but you've said you'd like the help of public housing and residents. What can the residents do, or what can Nycha do that they're not doing that can help you do help secure their homes and their residences? Are there some things that come to mind that you could help us with?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question, Mr. Schwartz. I don't want to say that they're not doing it, but I'd like to just change that to they could do more than what they're doing, even though they're doing it. Intelligence, letting us know who is responsible for the violence, who's carrying a gun. We really need to get these guns off of people who should not be carrying them. It's illegal, number one. Number two, nobody's trained on how to fire a gun. We have incidents where unintended victims are struck. Not that an intended victim makes it any less of a crime or any less of a tragedy, but when we have a child that's hit by gunfire, when we have somebody that's not part of a gang or a crew, the response that you get seems to last a little bit longer. But then again, you're going to have a second attempt, a third attempt, until they get the retaliation that they feel that they need to get. That's what we're trying to stop. What I would tell public housing residents, and they know their developments. Many have been there a good part of their life, some their entire life. They know who's doing what. There's ways to anonymously report it. They don't have to give their name. Crime Stoppers. Every tip was followed up on. And that's something that they could do. They have always been doing it. If they did more of that, that would be even better. And we appreciate the help that we have gotten, in the past. And that also goes for management at Nycha and caretakers. They tend to have a lot of information. When something happens, we find things out after the fact. We're trying to find out before it happens so that it doesn't. The shootings have to stop. The violence has to stop. And it's probably going to only stop when people give up carrying a gun. Nobody needs to be carrying a gun anywhere. There's a police department. If there's a problem, they could call us. I don't understand why people feel they have to. I've heard things like, well, I have to be protected in case somebody tries to do something to me. Again, we're talking about folks that are in a crew or a gang. But all that does is it leads to a bad result when something escalates. If you bump into somebody on the street, shoulder bump, accidentally step on somebody's shoe, look at somebody the wrong way, etc., and nobody's armed, it turns into nothing. We've all seen that. People maybe exchange words or looks, and that's it. And maybe that's all that should happen. If you have one or more individuals walking around out there carrying a firearm, and you have an incident like this, it could escalate. And that's where we think the motivation is in the majority of our shootings. Gang and crew motivated.
If I may say, I think you make an excellent point about the Nycha employees also could be helpful. One of the points I think everybody on this call probably has heard me say before, but I think an underutilized element in dealing with Nycha and its issues is the 2,000 employees who are also residents of Nycha. That's a lot of people who hear and know and see a lot of things.
Thank you again, Deputy Inspector Gottesman, for sharing those statistics and the reality of what's happening on the ground. I would like to turn now to our representatives from FDNY because fire safety is equally important and an issue that plagues some Nycha developments as well, especially with aging buildings and electric fires or heating units that people plug in themselves as we move into the heat season. There's a lot to be concerned with. So I wanted to turn our time to them, please. Chief Brennan, the mic is yours.
Good evening, everybody. Am I on mic? You can hear me?
We can. Please
Yes.
proceed.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'll be brief and I'll let Fabrizio talk after me more about educational stuff we're working on. Just to highlight a couple of brief serious fires we've had in Nycha buildings and the reasons why. February, May, and September. February, we lost a young lady, 35 years old, in a fire out in Queens. Fire was in the living room, no smoke detector. In May, we had another serious fire in a building in Upper Manhattan in a rehab 7-story Nycha building. Fire was in the kitchen area, careless cooking. We lost 5 people in that fire. We lost an adult and 4 young children, all 11 years old and younger. September 1st, about 6 weeks ago, I was actually at this fire. I responded to it. Fire in Upper Manhattan on Lenox Avenue, another kitchen fire. A lady was cut off from her getting out of the apartment. We had to rescue her via rope on the outside of the building. She was ready to jump from the window ledge from the 16th floor, but we were able to save her. So she was very lucky. So the 2 common denominators in these 3 fires were 2 out of 3 were no smoke detectors, and 2 out of the 3 were also careless cooking in the kitchen, whether it's unattended or just being careless, etc. Very serious, and something that shouldn't be taken lightly. The other thing with the winter coming up, the colder weather, I just want to mention about electric heaters. They should be plugged directly into a wall outlet, not via extension cord. They should be directly plugged in. They draw a lot of amperage. They should be kept away from anything that could catch fire, like curtains, because they get hot. But the big cause of fire with them is these extension cords. People, a lot of times the outlet is not in a convenient spot where you'd like the heater. So people buy these, very inexpensive couple of dollar extension cords at the corner store. That's probably the same thickness of like a lamp you have in your dwelling, right? They call them like zip cords. They're very thin. Electric heaters aren't supposed to be plugged into those. They get very hot, they melt. People have them under carpets in their apartments or whatever. And if it starts melting, it gets the carpet, going, and then we have a fire. So I recommend plugging them directly into the outlets. If you have to run it with extension cord, it would only be a heavy duty extension cord, something you have to go to like Home Depot for, or, it should be a minimum of, 14 gauge wire, something heavy. It should say heavy duty on it, Last thing, candles, very dangerous. We strongly refrain from people using candles in their apartments. We've gone to too many fires, too many tragedies of people using candles. Once again, unattended, the wind blows them over or something, the window's open, very dangerous. With that, I'll turn it over to Fabrizio for some other educational stuff we're doing with the residents of Nycha. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can. Please proceed.
So as the chief said, a lot of the main causes of serious fires or fatal fires are common, bad practices within households. And I think it's critical that, we try to focus on the importance of fire safety education across the board, not only seasonally. Granted, we are entering we're upon entering fire season right now, which we do see a lot of, or the bulk of major or horrendous fires during this time. And again, I think it's important that fire safety continue to be practiced and at the same time reinforced through many mechanisms. Again, the fire department has a fire safety education unit, which annually does over 700,000 individual presentations into groups and community-based organizations, and specifically throughout the years has worked with Nycha, specifically with the resident engagement division in terms of getting in front of tenant associations, working with the Department of Youth and Community Development, working with the Nycha-based programs. So we've been doing a whole lot throughout the years. Granted, COVID-19 changed a lot of our traditional outreach and our approach of engaging residents across the city, in keeping with the practices of social distancing to ensure the safety not only of members, but at the same time the public who we're educating. We transitioned to, as of March, all of our educational resources and our educators ultimately to a digital format. A lot of our content now can be viewed, and we're consistently uploading content onto the digital website, which we have been running since March. That website, FDNY Smart, all one word, fdnysmart.org/connect, is basically a useful library and a useful location of vital educational tools, which provide digital content for all ages on basically every element of fire safety or residential fire safety curriculum. To extend that, we have mobilized our fire safety educators to now engage New Yorkers from a digital approach too, where we are taking through fdnysmart.org, as we usually would do any request for fire safety presentations. We can now do it virtually. Just last week for Fire Prevention Week, which is held typically whenever October 9th falls, we did a variety of outdoor tablings, which we shared with all local stakeholders, elected officials, community boards, to share with residents across the board, where fire safety teams were out distributing information in public high traffic locations. We had a Fire Prevention Week video, which we shared throughout the city and through all social media outlets, which basically engaged youth and communities across the board to take fire safety messaging to a whole another level through this digital approach. And again, we're doing now that on a more constant basis, and we're looking to work with Nycha and resident engagement again of really introducing this on a virtual format, given that we're hitting the winter months now, and still looking to reintroduce that or reinforce that message throughout the year. So again, in regards to Nycha, as the chief said, I think the key things that we're going to be hitting is especially the importance of having and knowing the importance of having a working and smoke or carbon monoxide alarm in the home, and also the appropriate use of electric appliances, which is something that we're going to basically be focusing on throughout the upcoming months as well. Again, working with resident engagement, we aim to basically introduce this to Nycha tenant associations and tenant association leaders, and working with local stakeholders to ensure that these messages in this new format is used, and we can continue to educate the public as a whole.
And Director Caro, can you please repeat the name of the website that has all the training programs?
Yeah, so the content and the video curriculum can be found on fdnysmart, all one word, .org/connect. That's where we're uploading consistent, or we're uploading on a monthly basis new content that covers all aspects of residential fire safety. The aim right now is to hopefully get that translated, or those videos translated, in the top 10 languages. We do have publications in over 10 languages right now of all our fire safety pamphlets, which is on Fire Safety Publications, which I can share that website with Nycha and with the monitors team as well. But beyond that, in terms of requesting presentations and basically looking at the interactive website where we do have podcasts and all that, the general website, which can be translated in over 80 languages, is fdnysmart.org.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Chief Brennan and Director Caro, for that. One of the things that we were doing as a monitor team before COVID hit was reaching out to the TAPs and seeing if we could help coordinate some of the in-person training sessions. And even though it's now moved to a virtual platform, that's something that we'd still like to partner with TAPs and the FDNY to help facilitate. And we encourage everyone on this call, everyone watching, to please be facilitators to help connect tenant associations and residents to this important training information. So with that, turn it over to CCOP Chair Danny Barber to please open up the remainder of our discussion, which will be focused on the residents, highlighting what each of you are seeing as it relates to safety and security issues. Mr. Barber, the mic is yours.
Thank you, ma'am. So first and foremost, to Federal Monitor Bart Swartz and his team, thank you guys for your due diligence. Thank you for the conversations that we've been having. Thank you for the newfound partnership of working with CCOP. And to answer from Asha's presentation in the beginning of the meeting, the person that CCOP will have to represent on the CAC meetings will be Mrs. Lilith Lozano, who is the chair for Bronx North District Council. A little bit about CCOP. So January, February 2018, the residents of public housing, well, December 2017, CCOP held an election. I was elected the new Citywide Council of Presidents chair. So, and as being a resident leader, hearing the residents complain over the years on how Nycha hasn't been suffice, lack of service, closing tickets, all of the above that the monitor has brought up from the targeted areas that he's targeting. The residents have been saying for years that enough was enough. So as the newly elected chair, I listened to what the residents had to say. And along with the attorneys at the time, Avis Community Inc., we were working with, we went to court, presented it to CCOP, told CCOP my idea. CCOP agreed with it. We went forward and we filed the Article 78 in the state court, as well as a case in the federal court. Not to drag out the whole court case, and say June, roughly June 20th, 28-ish of 2018, we were given a ruling by the court that we would have a federal monitor to come in and oversee the operations in these critical areas where Nycha was lacking. So the monitor is here on efforts of the residents. So the residents, to me, have a good victory from the beginning on saying enough is enough and not wanting to accept the hardships that they're forced to live in. The monitor came in, they've been working, they formed the CAC. A lot of us in CCOP didn't feel that we felt we were left out, but we can't be everywhere. So after speaking with the monitor has reorganized and restructured how he's looking at things, and he's committed to a partnership with the Citywide Council of Presidents, and we've accepted it. What else has CCOP been doing? CCOP is currently redoing the bylaws. We work every Thursday with HUD, Daniel Sherrod, who has been an excellent teacher, who has been training us to do things the correct way, because a lot of the operations and ways we were taught aren't the way that HUD really sees for things to be done. So we've been going over that. We've been pushing and going back and forth with Nycha to start in-person meetings. It doesn't have to be 100 people at the meeting. It can be small meetings. The Zoom format can still go along with the meetings, where If it has to be a full board, couple of the board members can be there. Some of the others, elected officials, citywide chair, we can be on a Zoom call to oversee and attend the meetings. We can have smaller meetings with extensions to make it larger meetings, so that things like the Blueprint for Change, RAD, PAC, these are meetings that need to be held in person. And these are current arguments and back and forth that Nycha's having with CCOP, and CCOP is pushing back because we feel with the changes that are being implemented that the residents should be face-to-face to really work out. And we all know with the internet, there's a lot of interruptions and a lot of bad connections, and sometimes we don't always get our point across because of the service that we may have. I'm gonna go into, that's just a little bit of what CCOP is doing, but I kind of like the safety and security. That's kind of a good subject. I had a conversation with the monitor and his team about last week. And it was rough. I think it was like either Tuesday or Wednesday. And after we finished the call, I noticed that in my development, Andrew Jackson Houses, that there was a window to the lobby door that was missing. So I took a picture and I sent it out in an email format to Nycha, as well as including the monitor and Ms. Patton from HUD, to show that in the issue of safety and security, this glass was taken out of the door at 785 Cortlandt Avenue in the Andrew Jackson Houses because it was cracked and it posed a safety hazard to the residents. So the glass was removed last week on the 7th, October the 7th. The glass is still missing. Tomorrow will make a full 7 days that this glass has not been replaced. And the glazier's been at the development 2 days last week, and no one saw warranted. The doors are left open. If it's not the residents because the key cylinders aren't working, it's the Nycha workers that are cleaning the buildings that leave the doors ajar and forget to come back to close the doors. We have layered access systems that if the doors left ajar for a certain amount of time, it's supposed to send a notification to the Office of Safety and Security, and they're supposed to reach out to NYPD to respond to the necessary property. This isn't happening. And for us to say that Nycha's mission statement started out to provide safe, affordable housing. They failed graciously in their mission statement when it comes to safety. And I agree with you as well, Mr. Schwartz, because in the points and the factors that you are geared to target underneath the agreement, the monitor's agreement with the court, is it turns out to be that all of those issues are forms of safety and security, as you said earlier. And I am totally in agreement with you, because with the doors left open, we pose another safety hazard of the rodents to come into the building, where we see at the same building, 785. And I'm referencing Andrew Jackson because these are things that I can honestly speak on straightforward that I see on a daily basis, where back doors left open, and because the contractor is doing a steam leak as well as an underground trench to put a 50,000 ton concrete slab in to put new electrical wires to connect to Con Edison's grid, and you're disturbing their space. They're going into these buildings and they're winding up in the apartments. Some of the residents sit with their doors open. And when they call and put in tickets, they're saying they have rats, and the call center doesn't believe that they're rats. Oh, you mean mice. The lighting is bad in our buildings. I thank Lynn Patton for pushing with us to get us a jump on the safety. with Alliance. I wasn't in agreement with Alliance in the beginning until it was explained to me how their work was supposed to happen and how the opening communication that Lynn set up with the owners of Alliance, where they've been very fruitful. So as the CCOP or any resident leader that informs me about Alliance of their development, if they're not happy, I call the owners directly and we come to a resolution where they will call the supervisor with that team at that particular development and get to the bottom of it and correct it right then and there. Because as he said, they're here to service us. So pretty much that's about it. I don't.
Thank you so much, Mr. Barber. And thank you for your continued leadership on behalf of the residents in the city and for opening the floor up to our resident leaders. I've asked each to just present one issue, of course, among the many that you could address as it relates to safety and security and your developments and what you're seeing. But I've asked each member to address one big issue. And I'd like to first turn it over to Tenant Association President Tamika Williams-Moore to talk about the scaffolding and how that affects safety and security. Please proceed.
Thank you, Asha. Thank you, Bart. Thank you, Alika, for discussing reentry, and thank you, Lynn, for discussing Section 3, two major issues that impact our communities and our advancement. So sidewalk sheds are continuing to contribute an already dismal environment in our community, and also the crime. With the inadequate and subhazard lighting that takes place in the community, the sidewalk sheds are continuing to impose on that. Now we're going to have daylight savings and time is going to go back. And so once that happens, or forward, once that happens, fall back. Okay. Once that happens, it will get darker earlier, which is a major safety concern. Sometimes these sidewalk sheds do not have adequate lighting. Sometimes the lighting is out. The necessary repairs to fix the sidewalk sheds are not happening. A lot of times, senators such as ours in our district has given or allocated $250,000 toward lighting in the community that will help combat some of the sidewalk shed issues that they're posing dark spots. And so what I've been saying is that Nycha is not using those funds to get these projects started fast enough. We don't know where the funds are. The lighting is a major issue, and that's something that we need to address immediately, especially because we have so many sidewalk sheds throughout the community. Another issue is we would like Nycha to inform the development and its residents as to when the local law 11 work will commence and the duration of the project, instead of keeping the residents in the dark, literally. I think that would help give us a projection as to when we can expect to come out of the darkness and to come into the light. There's a lot of residents that are fearful. We have a lot of senior residents who are fearful for their lives because, again, the doors are being kept ajar. And not only the lobby doors, you have the basement doors being kept open as well. So that is a major issue, and I know it's systemic. That's not just something that we're suffering here in Pominock, but we would like to see that addressed immediately, hopefully. Thank you.
Thank you for addressing that. And now I'd like to turn to, I'm going to go a bit out of order, but just while we're talking about open doors and locks, I want to turn to Ms. Shakina Butler to please address gun violence and door lock access issues.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Shakina Butler from West Brighton Houses in Staten Island. Out here, we're dealing with a similar issue. We have a spike in gun violence over this pandemic. From beginning of June up until around about maybe a couple of weeks ago, it slowed down, but it was tremendous. Also with our door locks. So I was coming into my building and an 8-year-old showed me how she opened the door by pressing the number 9 on the keypad. We have the new doors. It was mind-boggling to me that these new doors with this new system, and an 8-year-old learned how to open the door by just pressing 9 repeatedly. So that means everybody has access to our buildings. Safety issue, big safety issue, because now we have people just sitting in our lobbies using our phone lines to plug up their telephones and stuff like that. So, and these things were reported and still nothing. That's it.
Thank you, Ms. Butler, for that update. And it's particularly alarming to hear that even with new doors, they haven't figured out a way to make them more difficult to access. And another thing that we hear pervasively is that even with new intercom systems or intercom systems that were installed 5 years ago, they still don't work adequately. So that's another issue because people need to leave the door open so they could get in because you can't buzz in. So it's, one thing feeds off the other. And it just seems like these things should be things that should be fixable. Thank you for highlighting that. Next, I'd like to turn to Mr. Gross, who to give poignant examples of the homeless issue that he sees. And that's something that I hope the mayor's office is also taking note of, and different agencies, because it's definitely systemic throughout the city, and one thing feeds off the other.
Thank you, Mr. Schwartz, the federal monitor and his team. I would like to address the homeless issue, what a lot of development suffer in mind as well. Our buildings, usually city-wide Nycha buildings, getting used for a lot of people, a lot of times homeless people, a lot of times for criminal activities. A lot of times people will walk in, just use it for a bathroom. And the problem what we have last year during the winter season with the homeless, they break into the elevator rooms, because the elevator rooms usually are warm, they have the motors, and they have a mess with the elevators. They urinate, make a mess over there, and our elevators was broken. And we find them sleeping on the staircase, in the hallways, eating, urinating. Is a mess, and I think we have to address it with I know since COVID-19 they stopped the program with the homeless outreach. They should, with the NYPD together, they should join together and come out to the development and just do very close. If they find homelessness, they should try to get it out, to get them help. And I think to cure a lot of from the problem, the safety issues in our development is, I think every tenant association president should have every month a meeting with the property management, included the red and PAC development, and address issues like lighting, broken doors, back doors is a big issue, is open. A lot of from the homelessness, a lot of criminal activities happen when people coming in from the back doors, and people is using our courtyard to do a lot of illegal activities. And I think we should go back to the old system we was having. If a cop went into our development, do the vehicles, they find people sitting on the staircases, they can charge them with trespassing. They changed the law because a lot of issues happen, but right now, all NYPD officers has already a body camera, so I think the other issues what was raised in that times will be correct. And I think we should work on the trespass issue. Or if an officer goes into a building, they see the same homeless, same criminal people hanging out in the lobby, in the staircases, after they give them one warning, they should come. If they find them the next day or a couple hours later, they should be able to arrest these people. That way, a lot of from the issues will get cured. And the same thing with the homeless people. They will have to be forced to be in the shelter or to get help, to get any assistance to get into living in a normal living space. I know a lot of times they're addressing the homelessness in my development. They don't want to leave. They like to sleep on the benches outside. They like to sleep in the building, in the staircases, on the roof landing. I think this is a major concern for all the tenants.
Gross.
Thank you.
Thank you for highlighting an important issue, and it's pervasive throughout the city. We hear it at almost every development. And you also raise a really important point about how the legislation can impact change as well. So I'd like to turn now to Ms. Ortiz, who has also highlighted a really good example of having a development that actually has good lighting cameras, but yet some of the problems, particularly with drug use, persist in the developments. And Nancy, if you could please very briefly highlight that. Take yourself off mute, please, Ms. Ortiz.
Can you hear
Now
me?
we're ready, please.
Okay, I apologize. First, I want to say thank you to everyone and all of your input and all of the issues that all of Nycha campuses are facing. Vlatic Houses has lighting that you could see an ant from one side to the other. We've got 384 cameras, top to bottom. Unfortunately, we are having a big impact on drug dealing and drug usage. In addition, they are the doors, they have these, what they call emergency codes. Everybody knows the code. I've asked for them to disable the code so that people cannot get in the building. They haven't done this. A lot of our doors are broken because the outsiders, they either break the lock or they break the magnet of the door from pulling it so much that now the door is no longer locking. This presents a serious safety issue. We have a lot of kids, we have a lot of teenagers here. I received a phone call a week and a half ago at about 11:30 at night from a hysterical mother. She looked out her window and she said there was a guy laying on the bench in front of her building, naked from the waist down. And he was out like a light. And we've never experienced this here. So to us, you know, this is not normal. It's dangerous. Although Vlatic has the lowest crime rate of the Nycha campuses, but it's still a big concern to us. I personally am even afraid to walk by myself after 8, 9 o'clock at night. Another issue that we're starting to have, motorcycles. We have motorcycles literally zooming in and out of the development, and they don't care if you're walking. You will have to jump out of their way. They're parking their motorcycles in front of the ramps for the elderly, so you can't get in through the ramp because the motorcycle is blocking it. So these are now the issues that we're facing here.
Thank you so much, Ms. Ortiz. I'm actually now going to skip the agenda a little bit to turn to Eva Trimble from Nycha to please give us an update on first what Nycha is doing to address some of the safety and security issues, and then to switch gears to give us an update on what Nycha is doing with regard to restructuring the organization. And she will share a short slide presentation on that.
Hi, thank you, Asha. I will just say I'm having some technical difficulties. All of a sudden, my internet went out. So I had to call back in through my phone. So I'm not able to actually share my presentation tonight because I'm not.
So why don't, the transformation issue is still such an ongoing one.
Yeah, I can just talk to it.
We'll share that with the group later, but if you could give the update on security issues.
Sure. I to be honest and to be fair, I'm not that involved in the security issues. I'm taking notes on everything that people have talked about tonight, and we'll definitely be communicating them back to the chair and general manager's office. I do know that we've been working lately with the Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice, or MOCJ. They've worked to put together what's called a playbook on safety and security issues for the city. It's not specific to Nycha, but it's how communities can get together and work together in regards to the challenging crime issues that you've all spoken about tonight. So we've been working closely with MOCJ to get some resident involvement in that. And so happy to connect anyone interested in that effort with the appropriate people here at Nycha to talk more about it. But I also, if I was able to, I would share the link on the chat, but I can send that out to you as well so that you can link to the playbook, or if you type in Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice Playbook, I'm sure you'll be able to find it online. It's a very helpful resource. So turning quickly to the organizational planning efforts to follow up on what the monitor Bart mentioned earlier, we have been working on many fronts over the last year. And so our Blueprint for Change effort is really multiple strategies to address different challenges at Nycha. So underneath the Blueprint for Change, we do have a capital stabilization effort that the chair has been doing resident town halls with and has been talking about pretty broadly in regards to a strategy to leverage additional capital to finally completely rehab our buildings in the way that are really needed. But we know that even with capital improvements, we still need to make some very big changes in the way that we operate our buildings. And so the organizational plan that's required for the agreement is something that we've been working on for a little over a year now, and we're calling it the transformation plan, partially because we want to make sure that you all realize that this organizational planning effort is not just about rearranging boxes on an org chart. This is about completely transforming the way Nycha does business in every aspect of our business. And so this is about really looking at how we deliver services to our residents and how we can improve it. So we've identified through engagements with residents, stakeholders, and employees, we've identified some really key pain points that we know have been issues for residents for a very long time. And we've been thinking about how we can make Nycha better. And so the transformation plan that we're working on now really has two different components. First, we are suggesting organizational changes to how we are structured as an organization. And that includes changes to Nycha's board, but also changes to our internal structures. So one of the biggest changes that I'll just mention now, but I will send more information on, and of course, you all will get to see the draft transformation plan as it is now. One of our biggest changes is thinking about how our properties are structured. Right now, we are structured into 6 different boroughs, which may sound odd, but it's 4 geographic boroughs with Queens and Staten Island put together, and then 2 what we call functional boroughs that are kind of old legacy categories of our properties. And so we have mixed finance and what we call NGO, or next generation operations. And so what we're looking to do as one of our major components of the transformation plan is to put all the properties back in their natural geographies, so that if you're a property in Brooklyn, you are managed by Brooklyn. And even from there further, we're looking at reshaping how those properties are managed. Right now, we have about 21 regional asset managers managing properties, but because the properties aren't divided naturally into their boroughs, we can have a regional asset manager that has properties on the Lower East Side, Staten Island, and South Brooklyn, which makes it a very difficult task to make sure you really have eyes on the ground and know what's going on with those properties at all times. So we want to create small neighborhood clusters so that managers can really effectively see what's going on at the properties. We think that will mean much more response, a quicker response to problems as they see it, and more ownership and understanding of what's going on at that neighborhood level. And so we're looking to go from 21 regional assets managers to 31 neighborhood directors. And so that's just an example of how we're really looking to change how we're structured to deliver better services. We're also looking at multiple business process changes. So in addition to the organizational structures, we want to change the way we're doing businesses. So you've heard me talk a lot about the annual review process. I've heard from so many of you on issues with the annual review process, issues with the partner portal, the resident portal that residents have to use. We know it's clunky, we know it's glitchy. We know it's not an easy process. We know there's a lot of errors in our rent calculations, and those are all things that we're looking to fix. We've been working with the Mayor's Office of Economic Opportunity and their Service Design Studio to redesign the annual review process to make it more user-friendly. We are working now with our IT department to implement some of those recommendations to change the screens and the resident portal to make it easier to enter information so that you're not entering information over and over again into different screens. This will also, we believe, reduce mistakes. It will also clarify the questions that we're asking so that we can actually get the right information to correctly calculate the rents. So we're really looking at a series of changes in how we do business. And I know that those are just two very big examples, but the organizational plan is filled with business process updates, organizational changes, and we're really looking forward to getting your feedback and comments on the plan. And so I believe that we have a draft plan that we can share with members of the CAC for some preliminary feedback before we're ready to do anything further. So I'll stop there, Asha, because I know that we didn't have much time, and I'm happy to have further conversations at your convenience.
Great, thank you so much for that update. And one of the most important things that I'm hearing, and I'm glad to hear, is that there is definitely going to be an opportunity for residents who are, let's face it, the constituents and the customers and the consumers of everything that Nycha does to weigh in on the process. Because even as we talk through this safety and security issue, another thing that I'm hearing is that heightened communication and efficiency could really help with these issues, reporting, you know, when things are broken, and then having that go through the proper channels in an efficient way to be able to fix things and to deal with certain known violators, et cetera. And so it just seems like every step of the way, just really having the voice of the resident heard and listened to and then acted upon will help certainly in all of the things that Nycha is looking to do through this transformation. So I'm glad we had a few minutes to give that update. We wanted everyone to know that this is still a draft that they're working very hard on, and to be able to take a look at it, weigh in on it, and to point out any holes and things that don't seem addressed, and things that can be improved upon. So I encourage everyone on this call, everyone watching, all of your residents, et cetera, to take them up on these opportunities to weigh in. I did skip our illustrious tap, Robert Hall, but I did want, because your topic focuses on a slightly different aspect of the safety and security, and that's how we could all formulate some partnerships. And you had a really good meeting with PSA recently, and I wanted you to highlight that, please.
Okay, I think it was the 29th of September. We had a meeting, first meeting, and it was a build-a-block meeting. And at that meeting, I had just under 80 individuals come into that room. It was the first meeting we had since March the 10th. So I'm preparing everyone. Once you start opening up, everyone's gonna be there. But in any event, the residents listened very attentively as we discussed what was going on as far as blueprint for change, things of that nature, all right, versus other plans, all right, that exist. And the most important aspect is that we as residents need to have a say in whatever change is upcoming so that we have a voice. It's supposedly in the 964s. We're aware of it. I'm glad Danny Barber's in the room because he has to regulate that. That's his responsibility. But that being said, residents really took in what was going on. And like I said, it was the most I've ever had in a room. But folks took advantage of that situation. And the problem that they really highlighted, it's minute in many respects because I've heard a lot of stories with regards to what Chief Brennan mentioned with fires, what Inspector Baldino mentioned about guns. Ours is dogs, all right? You have a rule, and it's not being enforced by NYCHA. Why do we have the rule if it's not going to be enforced? We have a lot of people who I do believe are somewhat traumatized for whatever reason amid the COVID also. But that being said, the rules are there for a specific reason, and for that reason in and of itself, it needs to be addressed. So dogs is an issue in many respects. I can't see a woman with 2 children come in and have 2 or 3 dogs in a 1-bedroom apartment. It's senseless in nature, but yet and still, these are things that are going on as we speak. So we've learned a lot. We need to go a lot. And all I ask is that we get, inclusivity as far as any decisions, as far as blueprint for change. We're learning, all right? Presidents are learning. They have organizations that are really working very hard so we can get compatible skills with NYCHA so that we can have the proper dialogue. So, and that being said, I'm going to sum it up with dead for time. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Hall. But I wanted to end on that note about how we can all exercise our voice and partner with one another for all of the things we discussed. Partner to get the fire trainings in the developments. Partner to educate NYCHA about the safety concerns in your development. Partner with NYPD to voice those tips, et cetera. There's so much that we can all be doing. And there's so much that we could all be doing together. So thank you for highlighting that. And we want this conversation to continue because, we have everyone around the room so we could help, what are the small things we can do? Like Bart said, let's, we really want to know if your lighting's out. That's something that can be fixed and it's not even that hard. So let's work on the big and small things that we can all do. And I know the heavy lifting obviously falls to NYCHA and to NYPD, et cetera, in this realm. But with everyone's vantage points, hopefully we can also help with this important effort. So thank you everyone for focusing on this topic today. It will be one that we continue to hear because as I said, every single time we talk to residents, it's one of the first things on everyone's minds because everyone wants to live in safe, secure, and sanitary and decent housing. That's fundamental and it's something we all deserve. So thank you for everyone's time. I did want to acknowledge our other CAC members who we didn't get to focus on your updates today. Many of you though did present at the last CAC. As you probably noticed, we keep flip-flopping who gets the primary mic. So we look forward to hearing from you next time, but we don't need to wait till a CAC meeting to update each other. So please keep me posted on everything so that we can adjust our next agenda accordingly. I did want to remind everyone about our October 22nd community meeting in the Bronx. And everyone is invited and please spread the word. And now I want to turn the floor back to Bart, please.
Thank you, Asha, and I will be brief, but I think one of the real values of these CAC meetings is that it gives us ideas for what we should be doing next and how we should be doing it. So I think one of the primary things I take out of this meeting is that you need an action plan for security, just the way you need an action plan for pests and for heat. And you don't have to call it an action plan, but you need that kind of specificity and an approach across the whole portfolio. And with so many of the problems being common problems, if you could figure out how to solve them in one place, you should be able to solve them in others. So when I go back, starting tomorrow, when we're talking again among the team members, I know many of you know Dan Brownell, who is the deputy monitor and takes on a lot of responsibility. One of the things we'll talk about tomorrow is how we can take a NYCHA-wide approach to this, and with some concrete steps being taken so we can apply things across the portfolio. I mean, there isn't anybody who doesn't want security for the residents. So we should be able to find a way to do this. So thank you. And thank you everyone for participating. It's a very helpful discussion. And I want a special thanks to Fred Baldino and his team. They went out during COVID, didn't stop them. They were out there all the time working. The information they developed for us is extraordinarily helpful. So thank you, Fred, and please pass that along. And thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night, all. Thank you. Good
Good
night.
everyone. Good night.
Thank you to our team. I appreciate all the hard work behind the scenes. Good night.
Good night. Thank you. Good job, Floretta.